It was very focused on what's unfolding in Ukraine, the politics of it, the economics of it. There was very little discussion, almost no discussion of the role that Canada's playing. And I'll be honest, that's my main interest. I think we've got a responsibility to understand what's happening and understand what our government is doing. Rather than presenting on it, I've opted to offer the words of Minister of Defense Jason Kenney. Because as people may know, the military operation, and this is apart from political, diplomatic, all the other, but the military operation that Canada is involved in, a NATO exercise, was in fact expanded and extended in April, just 6-7 weeks ago. And what I'm going to offer, because I think this says an awful lot, and it probably says it better than I could, I'm going to actually share some of the words that Minister Kenney offered at the press conference announcing the expansion of this operation, and also some words from General Lawson, who was the military operator that was also at this press conference. There was representation from the current government of Ukraine at this press conference as well, April 17th, 2015. So Minister Kenney says, sorry, just a here. There we are. Good morning. I'm happy to be here to follow up on the Prime Minister's announcement this morning and to discuss plans to further assist the Ukrainian government and people in their efforts to maintain sovereignty, security, and stability in the face of aggression by Vladimir Putin's regime. Since January of last year, the Government of Canada, that's January 2014, because again, this is April 17th, 2015, so 6-7 weeks ago. He says, since January of last year, the Government of Canada has delivered enormous support to the government and people of Ukraine to maintain their territorial integrity against this illegal and unjustified aggression by Vladimir Putin. In fact, we've provided assistance over $578 million worth, including loan guarantees for purposes of economic stabilization, humanitarian aid for displaced persons and non-kinetic military equipment, and that has helped to reduce casualties amongst Ukrainian troops and other support, including development assistance for Ukraine. This assistance includes initiatives to promote stabilization and economic growth in order to strengthen security and foster civil society in Ukraine. And this past year, Canada donated non-lethal equipment to Ukraine, notably a range of equipment needed for protection, logistics, medical care, goggles, ballistic protective equipment, bulletproof vests. There's a list that goes on. Later in the year, we followed that with a commitment to donate additional non-lethal military supplies, including the delivery of winter gear, and earlier this year we began providing Ukraine with radar satellite images of key strategic points in the eastern Ukraine to assist them in tracking the movement of foreign troops and equipment in their country. That's very interesting. I'm going to skip over a bit. So Canadian Armed Forces personnel will provide training and assistance across a wide range of military skills and areas. This will commence this summer and is in addition to training opportunities offered through our Military Training Assistance Program. This training will begin this year and complement other training opportunities offered through our Training Assistance Program. In response to Vladimir Putin's belligerent actions in Ukraine, we are working in close collaboration with our NATO allies and to maintain the strength and cohesiveness of Euro-Atlantic security. This training will be offered in concert with our like-minded partners. Again, there's another line in relation to Vladimir Putin's belligerence. And then the last paragraph. I should add, of course, that all of this is in addition to our very strong political efforts. As you know, Ukraine is the only European country to receive Canadian international development assistance, helping with greater transparency in its public sector, fighting corruption, and transferring to Ukraine some of Canada's best practices in terms of democratic governance, blah, blah, blah. I just want to underline this emphasis on assistance for growth, assistance for transparency, public sector reform. I think for all of us, these are code words that we've seen playing out in, I certainly watched very closely the exact same operation in Haiti, where there was a very specific agenda of neoliberalization, privatization of everything, essentially aggressive austerity being imposed. I'll just add as a final word, just because it gives some practical, like physical detail, this very brief statement that followed from General Tom Lawson, who's got this role. He says in the same press conference, "Thank you very much, Minister, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to be with you to discuss this important announcement and give a few details of Canadian Armed Forces contributions. First of all, permit me to point out, to put these acts of aggression committed by Russia in Ukraine this past year into context. NATO has announced a variety of measures. For 1 year, Canada made an active contribution to these measures by ensuring a presence on the ground, in the air, and on the sea as part of Operation Reassurance. 4 CF-18 Hornets and roughly 135 Canadian troops took part in the police air mission in the Baltic countries beside our NATO allies. The members of the Canadian Army were deployed to Eastern Europe and Central Europe to take part in training exercises. At sea, HMCS Fredericton is currently conducting numerous joint operations with NATO allies and has returned from exercises in the Black Sea." Last bit, so turning to today, let me say a little bit about the training mission announced by Minister Kenny. The training will take place primarily at the NATO Partnership for Peace. Well, that's very nice. Partnership for Peace Training Center in Yavrov, located in western Ukraine, close to the Polish border. This was the first time the troops were actually deployed to Ukraine itself. Armed Forces personnel will provide training assistance in the fields of individual and unit tactics training, military police skills and procedures, etc., etc. I think it's kind of obvious what that's saying, and I'll just underline the Canadian government involvement in Ukraine has essentially cross-party support, including, I would say, again, disturbing support from the federal NDP, the official opposition. I won't read it, but I just found a remarkable statement from Peggy Nash, who has actually intervened in this discussion in a number of ways. She's been on election monitoring missions in Ukraine, so I think she considers herself to be a kind of an expert. I learned from newcoldwar.org that she actually stood on a stage last summer with representatives of Ukraine's far-right right sector group that was fundraising for their paramilitary militias to fight in Ukraine. This is the people that Peggy Nash is sharing stages with comfortably. To my mind, this is something that those of us, fighting Canadian militarism, Canadian imperialism, and war-making should be paying attention to, acting on. I think we all know that the anti-war movement has been, in a period of really disturbing weakness and unable to respond to really the last wave of things, Canada's role in Iraq and Syria and so forth. I think this merits some really serious discussion. We had an important movement of opposition to Canada's role in Iraq in 03-04. Some movement against Canada's role in Afghanistan, which was also in part a NATO operation, like Libya, like Ukraine. But Libya, Ukraine, where are we? Where's the anti-war movement? Where's the left? I would say pretty dormant. Pretty dormant. That's my one comment. So with that, I'll just throw it open for questions. I hope we can have at least 10 minutes, if not more, of some questions and discussion. I see Richard here and at the back. Richard.
Yeah, well, of course, the statements by the Conservatives are what you'd expect in the circumstances. They work in a Cold War framework still. They're a little out of step with the Pentagon and Washington, by the way, on this one, which is a little more tentative about the way it's approached this thing. I think what we really have to ask ourselves is, why is there this ambivalence among so many people about the Ukraine-Russian confrontation? And I think the reason is fairly simple. The facts are elementary. I haven't heard anybody here today challenge this. There is this revolt in the Maidan Revolt, and there's a change of government. They overthrow one corrupt president, elected, yes, but totally corrupt, and they replace him with another who's probably equally corrupt. Ukraine is in very bad shape. In the eastern part of the country, which is predominantly Russian, and which is the industrial center of Ukraine, and which has very close relations with Russia, going back to the days of the Soviet Union and so on, obviously there's great concern about the direction of what that's taking place in the rest of Ukraine. And so they then establish what, and I'm quoting the slide that Roger showed us, the People's Republic of Donetsk, and they have the Parliament of Mokrushyna. Well, those are separatist actions. There's no other way to describe it. After separation, you can hope, like Roger, that there's federation or something, but it's not happening right now. Obviously, Putin has his own reasons to worry about this, and this goes back quite a bit, as Halyna's description of events shows, that for several governments in succession, the question of unification with, or unity with the European Union has been on the agenda, and possibly NATO, and so on. So now this looks like another qualitative step forward in the whole process. So he acts on primarily defensive motives, I will agree, but he does give support to the separatists in the East. You see, so what you have is a situation that's a little bit complex, and it doesn't fit within the old binary opposites approach that we all knew during the Cold War. You see, during the Cold War, the question of whether you defined a situation, a country as imperialist or not imperialist, or whether you described a situation in the Third World as colonial or not colonial, these were important. These were principled questions, and they determined where the framework within which you approach global politics. That really doesn't apply anymore. I think it's not a useful way to approach the thing.
I'll just ask you to wrap up with a question.
Yeah.
Final
What you have now is a global capitalist system, and countries are integrated in different ways within it. Obviously, China and Russia, because of their past, are in a better position in some ways to cope with this because they come from a very strong background. Russia, furthermore, of course, has a huge nuclear arsenal. And so it's part of the capitalist system which operates under American hegemony, the rules established by American hegemony, World Trade Organization, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what happens is that, of course, there's going to be conflicts within this, but since the Second World War, there's been no inter-imperialist wars, conflicts. There's been tensions, pressures, and so on, but there was nothing comparable to what went on between the First and Second World Wars.
Okay.
So I think
Last
that,
point.
I'm saying that you have, for example, the BRICS are something of a challenge within that framework, and so you have a lot of tensions between countries. The United States Russia and the United States are jockeying with each other in this situation. So it's very difficult to use this old binary opposites thing. I'm not surprised that Roger really spent very little time trying to prove that Russia was not imperialist. I don't think it's a terribly important question.
Okay.
It's another capitalist competitor, along with many others in the world scale. It has relative strengths and relative weaknesses.
Okay, so no longer important. I saw a hand here, and did I see one over here? Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry. My name is Maria Haig. Actually, I just by accident saw this presentation I'm kind of sorry that this audience was not at my presentation yesterday, where I was talking about claims and facts. And what I want to remind that it's actually what are the facts are. The facts are that people rose up on this Maidan. It is a revolution of dignity. I looked at the newcall.org website. I am personally insulted that it's all in quotes. Now, it was revolution. I was on Maidan myself, and it was true. People got tired of being humiliated. They rose up until against corruption. East Ukraine, the same thing. They had even worse lives in terms of you look at this environmental situation, absolutely terrible on Eastern Ukraine. But now it's framed as a civil war. It's not civil war. There was no guns, there was no armaments. It was imposed, the guns were provided. And by the way, the Novorossiya, it's gone. The project is closed. Putin announced it's not. The project it was canceled just last week, and it's official that Novorossiya project is dead. So this is what I just want to point out that this is the claims and what are the facts and what are the claims. I am a bit, I think this is, I mean, there is a reason why, what Ukrainians actually want. They want open society that they did not have. This is what they are really, people died for it and they continue dying. And this is, and I think it is a bit this new cult that, and the Truth Out website, it's abusing it. You're just taking this Western standards of always doing two sides of the story and abusing the thing that it's, there are facts and there are claims, and you're making the claims.
Okay, question here in the middle? And
Oh.
then I think probably we should let Roger and Halyna
Yes.
wrap up. Are we, is it 10:30 or we go to 10:45?
So we can go to
10:45.
Okay,
Okay, we'll go beyond 10:30 if
okay,
if
I
there's
will
discussion.
shoot it, I think I will do more like a commentary, because I think everything is, first and foremost, I think it's so cute that we're talking about Russia. Russia owns the Crimea. Crimea has always been Russian. So I don't even carry the word annexation. There is zero reason why people who see Bandera as their hero will sit their flag on Nakimov's square. It's idiotic. It's not going to happen. Russia would never allow it. Even was it Yeltsin, John Yeltsin could not allow it. So the audacity to delete history, to the fact that there were 25,000 Ukrainian soldiers stationed in the Crimea, and only 2,000 of them returned to Ukraine speaks loudest. Okay? Eastern Ukraine is not only industrialized, it's occupied people that are pro-Russia. Okay, and the Russia is in the back. So the idea, people who see the Soviet as occupier, the Soviet who actually create this bigger country, who are demolishing all the history, vandalizing the history of the Soviet Union, cutting, humiliating the veterans, bombing Novorossiya, will somehow democratically be integrated into Europe, and this entire area will acquiesce, is the kind of audacity of what Hannah Arendt called banality of evil, but I will now call banality of discourse. It is so, because it will not work. And by the way, the president just elected, Poland, told him, I will not meet you until you denounced, the resuscitation of Bandera because of the violent massacre, 200,000 Ukrainians. This, by the way, has not been appeared in the Western media, because this is, again, is actually the big story that has not been reported.
You mean the statement from Poland?
No, yes, by the new president that's been elected. Of course, Poroshenko cannot do that, because he depends on the right sector. Poor Peggy Nash, I actually campaigned for her. Can you believe this? Can you believe? I'm from Toronto. I teach at Carleton, but I actually campaigned for Peggy Nash. No, the entire thing is a farce. It's not going to work. Putin will stand firm. Russia will stand firm. Okay? Poland Eastern Europe is rising up. Expect millions, if not more, of the Banderites to come to Canada. So be ready for that.
Okay.
This is the real fact. Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Al?
The purpose of the new Cold War site is to get the facts.
Yeah.
If you read what is on it, instead of simply deciding in advance that you're not going to read it because you don't like what you think you're going to read, you will see that.
Yes.
So don't tell me there's no facts on that site.
Me?
No,
No,
not you.
me. What are
Person
the
behind
facts?
you.
What are the
Person behind
facts?
you.
People, what are the facts?
You say
I do
the
some-
facts you
You know
will
what,
find.
I also
if
want
you-
to-
She said she had read the site.
Yeah, I did,
Folks,
yes.
folks,
We
I'll
do
share.
on
I
this.
want to
ahead,
know,
Al.
I want to
I'm
know who's
misrepresenting
funding.
you.
I want
There will
to
be no
know
shutting
who's
down.
funding
If this is
it.
Sorry,
the democracy
I'm shutting
that you
down.
champion, that you
Democracy.
shout somebody
Listen to Al.
down, we know what you mean by an open society. You're proving it. You're proving it.
Yes, I am proving it, yes.
Let me just explain.
Okay, one little intervention.
Excuse me, sir.
Sorry, Alan,
I'm
everybody,
actually speaking.
we've had
I'm
2 to 3
sorry.
minutes from
Yes.
each speaker.
Yes,
Alan's got
please
the
go
floor.
Please go
You
ahead.
can finish your 2
If
to
we're
3
for an
minutes.
open society, I don't know which side you, but excuse me, I would just like to finish.
Yes, please,
Go ahead.
sir, go ahead.
The purpose of this site and why Roger and I set this up, and Radhika, after going to Yalta, is that what you hear in the press and what you hear from the left, what you hear from the Peggy Nash, have no relation to the facts.
Yes.
We have tiny resources, tiny resources, no Kremlin money, no media money. No, we decided we are going to be independent of the official sources. Why do we do this instead of just relying on Facebook? Because Facebook is the most tremendous, social media is the most tremendous manipulated letdown. It's not the new Wikipedia. We're trying to establish new standards. If we fall short, it's very simple. Tell us what we've done wrong, send an email, we will do better. There are articles there where you'll see. Postscript. We have since been informed. We change our mind. We try to do what the journalists should be doing, and I invite you to join it. Second thing, another fact. The Social National Union, the founder of fascism in Ukraine. You talk about this rising in Ukraine, okay? It is an established fact, and we can show the people who've done the detailed analysis that the snipers who are shooting on the crowds in Ukraine were from the hotel room. They were organized by the fascists. It was a classic fascist takeover. There are now 7 members of the cabinet who are members of the far-right organizations. 7 out of 26. This is a group, and everybody, when you talk to them, they say, oh, but the fascists only got 1% of the vote, so they don't count for anything. They don't care about democracy. They control the fascist battalions that are attacking the only ones who are actually willing to fight, the fascist battalions on the Eastern Front. Why? Because you read, again, facts, what they declare to be their ideology. Not merely ethnic purity, that's just for starters. No, ethnic superiority. Straight Hitler fascist ideology. They are being proclaimed in the Kiev press, including the English-speaking press, as heroes of the nation. What you are seeing is that neoliberalism is no longer capable of holding down popular resistance using the methods of democracy. What you are seeing is an experiment with physical force of the most brutal kind as a substitute for what the West has so far tried. And you only have to look at what's happening in Greece to see why they are experimenting with it. Because neoliberalism cannot any longer be imposed by open society. It's being imposed by force. And Ukraine is the laboratory. And so don't just worry about the expats from Ukraine coming to Canada. Worry about what happens if the Harper government finds that it's not possible to get the Canadian people to accept neoliberalism much longer.
Yeah. Right. Or other parts of the world. Yeah. Okay, we've had 4 questions and comments. Maybe we can hear a quick response from, or a brief response from Roger and Halyna. Was her last? Oh, I'm sorry.
What does gentleman
you did
have
have
to say?
hand up.
Very short
Go ahead.
intervention. Okay, facts is a very strong word. Okay, perception is probably equally important, but facts are facts. So when Mr. Poroshenko goes in front of the TV and shows a couple of passports proving a foreign invasion, I think it says a lot about that invasion. Okay. So in Iraq, we didn't have that, right? There was no point of showing American passports, in Iraq, right? So we saw that. So the lunacy of this language and this discourse is really appalling. And the fact that we have this kind of really, how should I put it, very small audience, it's also a fact that the discourse is basically probably not going into the right direction at the present time.
Okay, thank you. Roger and then Halyna.
I should mention a couple of forthcoming events in Toronto and also in Vancouver on the same date. There'll be public forums discussing the situation in Ukraine. I'm speaking in Vancouver on that date, and Halyna is speaking in Toronto along with others on a panel. In Vancouver, it's just myself speaking. And on June 22nd in Hamilton, the former ambassador of Canada to Yugoslavia, James Bissett, is speaking at a forum, so I invite you to go to that. And also, you'll see notices on the tables here of an important conference happening in Winnipeg, a weekend, 3-day discussion of geopolitical economy. So take that with you and look at that. Very quickly, no civil war in Ukraine. Well, this is the chasm. We live in 2 different worlds. So until we can have some common understanding of factually what's going on in Ukraine. It's very difficult to arrive at an intent, and this is the challenge of Ukraine today, because ultimately a political solution is required in Ukraine. A military solution will be a disaster for everyone. And, the Kiev government does not yet understand this, and so we hope that the pressure of international public political opinion can begin to really up the pressure on the Kiev government that it negotiate with very legitimate grievances. And by the way, they're not only in eastern Ukraine, they're in Odessa, they're in the far west of Ukraine among the national minorities in there, and so on. This ultra-centralized and now monist, that's the term that Richard Sakwa uses, very mainstream British journalist, talks about the monist Ukraine, that is, as Halyna described, as authoritarian Ukraine, of Ukrainian only, is, that's a dead end for any country, including for Ukraine. So this is what we can hope, is that we can generate enough awareness and pressure that the necessary political solutions come in Ukraine. And as I said, I don't know what the ultimate solution is. Nobody does, including on the Novorossiya project. This may develop over time. I don't know. Right now, I would say it's a minority opinion among, that arc of territory from Odessa up to Kiev. That's what I understand. But this is a legitimate political project. This is not illegal to advocate so-called separatism. Separatism today in the context of Ukraine is a license for violence and even murder against those so accused. So we should be very careful with the term, and it's also not factually true. We will see what the ultimate solution here is. There is big stakes in how we understand Russia, and this should be evident for anyone, as you are, Richard, a scholar of Latin America. It matters a lot in Latin America today that Russia is not an imperialist country, that it doesn't have the same kind of imperial ambitions on the continent as historically the U.S. and Europe has had. That seems to be very evident, and it's one of the reasons why I support it.
Okay, I'm getting a signal from the door that there is another session starting, so Halyna, do you have a final word? No? No final word?
No, because only just a couple of words, because if you look at the last year's, or this last spring's survey, they clearly show that most support came from Western Ukraine. Really done. There were people from Eastern Ukraine, but the majority were from Western Ukraine. This is again Western Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine. And I'm sorry, but there was a very violent part of those protests. Of course, it was civil unrest, and which was triggered by corruption and all of that, but there was this violent element that no way of denying. It was there, it was present.
Okay.
Ottawa
Okay, we're going to adjourn. Thank you, everybody, and thank you to our presenters.
Now,